Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Eric G. He is administered personality-based coaching for more than 20 years, built a successful education company that used his personality typing method to better the lives of more than 20,000 students, parents, and teachers. And we'll be talking about his book, The Power of Personality. We'll talk about all this. It's a culmination of decades of research and his application. We'll talk about all this. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know how I can say that correctly, but thank you.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show once again, Eric, this time on the Author's Voice with KJ. We'll talk about your book. We'll talk about your book for sure, The Power of Personality, Unlock the Secrets to Understanding Everyone in Your Life, including yourself. We'll talk about all this. But before that, let's understand about, how did you transition from writing also? Because one is very busy in life. You as an author, how did you think about becoming an author at all? Many a times you are so busy in doing things, it just does not occur to you. I want to understand a bit about your journey towards becoming an author.
Yeah, I owned an education company for about a decade. And, as I'll talk about later, I used a lot of the personality typing methodology that I developed and I explained in the book or describe in the book. I developed that a lot through the decade I owned that education company. And then, I shuttered it. And I took up screenwriting or, movie writing, which was actually my academic background. So I went to school for that, decided to pursue that. This is a long story, but I joined a writer's group. And in that writer's group, you start writing your screenplays among other people. And then we go to the bar after and drink and kind of talk about, our ideas and things. And the personality typing came up and I mentioned that. And so people got really excited about figuring out what animal personality type they are. I describe all about the animal personality types in the book. And then a friend of mine came up to me and said, hey, people are really interested in this. And it's started this whole conversation at this bar. Maybe instead of writing screenplays, maybe you should just write a book on this. And of course I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I got creative things that I got to do. But eventually she put it in the TV show that she was writing for. And at that point, then I decided, okay, if that's interesting enough, for that writer's room and to put that at least in one episode of their TV show, I probably should write a book on it. So that's what I did. I started maybe in the middle of the summer and finished by the end of the fall. And, sooner or later I was able to get a publishing deal or an agent, then a publishing deal. And then it was published last year.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good you wrote it so that people can come to know about their own personality. So, let's come to the book itself. We'll talk about this book, The Power of Personality, that you can see it's your book on the screen. So in terms of the power of personality, yes, it's there also behind your thing. That's the good part of it. I want to understand, Eric, what does this power of personality all about? What have you written in this book? And did you first know about your personality before writing this book? Okay, this is what you are all about, and this is what you want to do in life, becoming an author and taking all these things forward?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The first thing came to me was why am I so weird, right? Or I think a lot of us feel that way sometimes when we see the world around us and doesn't necessarily fit what seems natural to us. And I think the danger sometimes is that we try to adjust and change who we are to adjust and figure out or at least to acclimate to our surroundings. But sometimes it's better to actually truly find out who we are. And that's kind of what inspired me to study personality typing, studying personality theory. And I did that for a few years before owning the education company that I mentioned. And then it was really when I started that company that I really developed my own methodology based on previous typologies. So it's just a fancy way of saying, look, I've been doing it for a long time. And it started with me feeling really weird and figuring out myself. And then at that point, realizing that figuring out myself really helped me. So hopefully I could help other people discover themselves. And then I wrote a book on it because I figured that would be the best way to spread the word.
Absolutely. So coming to the book itself, what is it that you have discussed in the book? It looks like that, okay, it will talk about personality, but someone who has not read the book is only seeing the book. What should they know? What is inside the book?
Yeah, it basically will teach you how to personality type all the people around you, including yourself, as the title so aptly says. And it puts people into 16 different personality types. And I know that anyone who's studied personality types, that's actually going to be a really familiar number. But of course, for those who haven't, it's going to be totally new. But I will say that even those who are familiar with MBTI or Myers-Briggs, which is like very universal, and there's 16 types there, my methodology differs greatly from how you diagnose the individual types. Because first I start with 4 major personality packs. And then once you find out what pack you're in, there are 4 animal personality types within that pack. So of course, 4 times 4 equals 16. But it's important to know that the 4 major packs are there because I think sometimes we start realizing that there are people that are similar to us, that are around us, but maybe aren't exactly the same. So I think understanding that there are 4 major groups helps people understand, okay, like there are people like me, but we're not exactly the same. So let me figure out how we're similar, and then I can figure out how we're different. And then I can figure out like the other packs because those people are really different than I am. And so that's kind of what you'll figure out in the book is like you'll go through the whole methodology. And I know it sounds really wonkish and like boring, but I think people find that there are a lot of anecdotes. There's a lot of applicable ideas and pop culture references and things where people can actually read it and hopefully have fun. Maybe not too much fun, but have enough fun where they can actually apply it to the real life without getting super bored through the first 100 pages.
Right. So tell us a bit about those 4 personality types, the major ones, so that people know and how to actually come to know about, okay, what type it is. Because there must be so many things overlapping. So help us through your book. What have you discussed in the book? What are the different personalities so that they get an idea and are, enticed to go and get your book for themselves?
Yeah, I think the first thing to know is that there's one major pack that makes up about half the population. And, the packs are divided based on their number one priority. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I like a lot of different things and I value a lot of different things. So as I describe in the book, it really just depends on which one you prioritize more, because we all value one thing more than the next thing. We might think that we value them equally, but when push comes to shove, we're always going to choose, or almost always going to choose the one on top, right? So one major pack that makes about half the population values safety and security. So I think overall, I think we can see that value kind of permeate society, that idea that, let's go to school, follow the teacher's rules, get good grades, work hard, and then after that, then maybe go to college or maybe go to some advanced studies, do the same thing so that way when you exit that, you can get a good job, very steady, secure job. And then once you get that, then you can start a family, find a family and build a house, and all those kinds of things that I think are taught to us at an early age. But it's important to know that that's about half the population. But since it's half the population, their values tend to get pushed on a lot of different people, which is great for them, but not necessarily great for the other half of the population that have entirely different values. So I always start with that one first, because I want people who are of that path to realize that there's a lot of different people out there, and not to necessarily push your values, which they often deem as the normal values, onto people who are different. And it's also kind of nice to know that for the people that are different, to know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're okay. Yes, half the population tends to want something that maybe you don't necessarily want. Maybe you don't want to, get married, have kids, build a house and stay somewhere. Maybe you want to travel the world. Maybe you want to do a whole lot of different things that you don't see in the commercials. And that's okay too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in terms of, you have brought that different animal types, if I've heard correctly. Why did you bring that? Why is it necessary? How should people know, okay, I am a human being, but this is what my animal type looks like? It is, I understand it in ancient times also, there have been references about it, but I want to understand it through your book. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, the easy explanation is we use animal types, or I use animal types in the book because they're easy to remember, right? If you say someone is a fox personality type, or you say someone's a shark personality type, one, you're not going to forget that. And two, I think archetypally, as you were saying, our archetypal knowledge of what animals do and what they represent kind of presents itself, like for most of the animals that I use in my methodology. So if you say someone's a fox, and people know, oh, they're like crafty, they're shrewd, maybe a little sneaky, probably very sly and tricky. They're not necessarily as sturdy as, let's say, a beaver personality type. When we think of beavers, we think of like hardworking animals that build dams. that help like the community, right? And I think both of those things are vital in our society. I think oftentimes, once again, the beavers fit under that personality pack that values safety and security that I mentioned earlier, right? So I think a lot of times people are like, that's what you should do, is like build things that help the community, which is great. But like I mentioned, the foxes, that falls under a totally different personality pack that values excitement. And I think sometimes when you value excitement versus safety and security, you're more likely to want to take risks. You're more likely to take, chances, which I guess is a risk. And you're more likely to adjust on the fly versus wanting something set and secure. And I think anyone who thinks of jobs like, let's say, firefighters, salespeople, professional athletes, artists, dancers, like things where you need to adjust in the moment and do things like perform, or just basically, like if a tree were to fall out of the sky, adjust to that. Like, I think that is what that personality pack specializes in. So that's why I use the animals, because I think using the animals is a really easy way to remember and also see that each individual animal has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Right. So if I understood it correctly, half the population is the stable type, the normal types that we talked about. So that is what animal type is that, and what are the other three? What is the percentage of the other three main personality types? What animals do they represent, and which one do you fall yourself into?
Okay, so with that main half of the population personality pack, I call them gatherers. And within the gatherer pack, there are 4 animals. So I mentioned one earlier, the beavers, and then we also have stags, elephants, and we have bears. And so those are the 4 that fall into that. And once again, they all are going to prioritize safety and security in some form or fashion. Within those 4 animals, some are going to get their safety and security through family, either building a family or protecting the family that they have. And other, like let's say the stags and the beavers, will get their safety and security from following a sense of duty, a sense of order, a sense of like, this is my role in the community and I need to fulfill my responsibilities of those roles. But we have the hunters. I call them the hunters. It's a totally different personality pack. That's the one that seeks excitement, fun and excitement. And under those, we have the foxes, we have sharks, we have butterflies, and we have peacocks. And just like how the gatherers seek safety and security in different ways, the hunters all seek fun and excitement in different ways. And so that way, like, it's not exactly like MBTI, which is something that people are familiar with, which is just like a bunch of letters and like a juxtaposing, like, are you extroverted versus introverted? It's not really like that. It's more of an algorithm. So like based on your values, once you figure out your core value, from there, that's when you figure out which one of the 4 animal personality types that you fit under. Me personally, I am part of a personality pack called the shamans. The shamans were not that plentiful in the population, which is why we probably feel so weird. I think we make up about 8 to 10% of the population. And within the 8 to 10% of us, there's our 4 other animals. We have the dolphins, we have the pandas, we have the baboons, and we have the humpback whales. And what we all prioritize is kind of self-knowledge, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Like, we basically search for things about ourselves pretty much all our lives, which is why when any shaman's younger, they're going to feel like totally lost because everything around them is different. And they're not always secure, or they're kind of insecure about what their values are and who they are as a person. And they're constantly questioning themselves. And they kind of go through that their whole life. The nice thing is by the time they're an adult, maybe in their 40s, maybe hopefully earlier than that, they've kind of put in the work for discovering themselves. And then at that point, they can definitely try to help other people discover themselves, which is probably why I wrote the book to begin with. So that was a long way of saying I'm a shaman type. Specifically, I'm a baboon. Baboons, we're kind of loud. We're kind of like just annoyingly preachy sometimes. But when we really believe in something, we like to advocate for it and give voice to our own ideas and principles.
Wonderful. So there are lots of, overlaps in personalities. And many a times you see, you want to be associated with all the good things that you read about anything, and then you may get just swayed by that while understanding your own personality type. How do you actually ensure that you are not, you are getting to understand yourself with the right personality type? Is that possible from the book? What are the things, how one should do for that? Do I need to totally dissociate from myself and then
Mhm.
try and understand myself? Help us understand that part, Eric.
That's a good question. It just depends on the person. I do think it's so much easier to personality type other people than ourselves, because obviously I don't think anyone thinks they're perfect, but we're definitely loath to accept the negative aspects of personality, which is why I love to focus on them. I think when like you were saying, when people say positive things about like personalities, everyone is going to say yes to that, right? Like if you say, "Oh yeah, you're responsible," or "You're cool," or you adjust, you're like popular, whatever. People are gonna be like, "Oh yeah, that's me. That's totally me," even though maybe it's not, right? Whereas I think if you tell someone a negative part of their personality, they're only going to accept it and agree to it if it's true. And I because oftentimes I'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're like this," but more than likely at your worst, you tend to be a bit flaky, right? So there's like the spontaneous person at their worst can be a bit flaky, and you tell that if you were to tell that person, "Oh yeah, at your worst you're like irresponsible," I think they're okay accepting that. They're like, "Yeah, I get it. Like sometimes I'm not really good at keeping house, and sometimes I run out of toilet paper and things of that nature." They'll accept that. But if you were to tell them that their weak point is that they're rigid, or that they don't necessarily they all like follow the rules like in a very strict way, I think they'll totally not accept that. So that's why the negative, or focusing on the negative aspect of personality, is probably a more accurate way to figure out what people are than the positive.
Right, right. So someone says, Eric, your good book is good. I understand it. I will know my personality type. I will know others' personal. What do I do with that information? Where can they utilize all this information, Eric, for themselves in their work, in their jobs, in their offices? Help us understand in a bit more detail so that people can actually find value from that point of view.
Well, I'm going to say the one that I believe is the most important. That's not necessarily the one that people look for when they read a book like this, but I will say the one that I think is the most important first, which is I think if you find your personality type, you'll find out what that personality type, what makes them happy. Because I think we don't always know what makes us happy because we haven't put in the work toward that. Maybe when we were younger, we were told to do certain things and we just did them. And we got, let's say, a good paying job. And with that good paying job, we got some money and then we bought things to make us happy. And I think there's this like, I won't say an illusion, but there's like this kind of haze where we're like self-satisfied, but maybe not necessarily aware that there's probably a deeper happiness sitting within us or residing within us that we haven't really addressed. So I think when you discover your personality type, you can discover what that deep need is. And ideally, you can just start going for that, no matter what your career is. It doesn't have to be your career. It could just be your hobby, but whatever it is, you can discover your own passion. And I think that's just the best pathway on the road to happiness, right? Whereas it can also help you in other things. So that is the most important thing. Figure out what you love, because oftentimes people don't know what they love, and personality type will help you figure that out, and then you can pursue that. However, it can also help us in our jobs. It can also help us in relationships, whether they're romantic relationships or, most importantly, parent-child relationships, because I think the more you understand that people around you are different, then the more you can adjust, right? Like, especially if you know what you are and you know what the other person is, there are obvious conflicts that are going to occur. Like I just mentioned two of the more populist packs, right? One personality pack like safety and security, one likes excitement. That's 85% of the population between those two packs. And they have two conflicting values, right? So I think, I always say, like, the person who loves fun and excitement, they like to go on roller coasters because on a roller coaster, they think that, who knows, they might die. I mean, they're not going to die, but that feeling that they're in some pseudo danger is kind of exciting and they like it. But you tell someone who values safety and security that, and they're just be like, what? Like, why would I ever want to feel like I'm going to die? That's totally opposite of what I want out of life. So even just that difference in values and understanding that can help us, whether it's in the work environment or if it's in a romantic relationship or in a parental relationship.
Absolutely, Eric. So I'm just curious to understand one thing. Which one dominates our, fate or our own understanding of ourselves? Is it the personality type, or is it the sun sign, moon sign, whatever people keep on continuously suggesting? Because help us understand from that point of view. People think, all born in a particular month or a particular date, they will have this particular thing, they will have this particular life, and they will have this particular sort of a personality. Where does this personality and those things, does it meet, or both are two different things, Eric?
I mean, for myself, I'm not a particular expert in the sun sign, moon sign stuff. If you were to ask me as a layman, I would say that, if you're born in a certain month, it's tricky because you might find traits that do match you, like within like your zodiac sign or whatever. But then you're also going to find that means that everyone who's born, like who shares your birthday, is going to have those traits. And I think just experience tells us that that's not true. I'm Chinese, and we have like year of the snake, year of the dragon, and all those things. And as someone who is year of the monkey, I used to grow up and I felt like my personality description based on the monkey was actually pretty accurate. So I was like, oh, this is great. This is so accurate. But then that would mean that everybody born in my year, which means every single student in my graduating class, would also have to share my personality traits, right? Theoretically speaking. And it's very obvious, at least to me, that no, that wasn't the case. So I think for me, with personality types, it's really, I'm not a big fan of certainty. So it's really more experiential. Like if you look at the people around you and you start seeing patterns of behavior and start developing that, I think that's kind of the right way to go. And that's kind of where how I developed my methodology to begin with. When I owned my education company, we'd have about 1,000 students a year. And with every 1,000 students, you have at least 1,000 parents. And we can kind of see that interaction. And then you just start making mental notes and taking statistics on different personality types. And that's kind of where I developed it there. So at the end of the day, we've all met like thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in our lives, tens of thousands at least. And hopefully my book will help people at least be able to understand those people better, because I think the information is inside our minds and we have that intuition there. It's just that we need some guidance, and hopefully my book can give people that.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to understand, what was the most challenging part of writing such a book?
Oh, this sounds like a real terrible thing to say, but it wasn't super hard. And I know that does not apply for everyone. For me, it wasn't super hard just because I had been talking about it and using it and teaching people about it for so long that it really was, I already had a real set structure there, which was super helpful. So I think at the end of the day, if you're writing something that you really believe in and that you've like discussed, I think it's probably fairly easy. And I'm not the most structured person. In fact, I'm not structured at all. But in this particular instance, since it's personality types and there's 4 packs and then 4 within it, like the structure kind of just wrote itself. And at the end of the day, I think when people want to write, I think you just got to sit your butt down in a chair and just devote like however many hours that you have in the day. Let's say you have 2 hours of free time every day, then you got to just keep consistent, sit there, do it. That's kind of what I did. And I think eventually it'll be finished. Don't give up, keep doing it, and be consistent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in a nutshell, what would you want the readers of this book, what key message do you want them to take away from this book?
I would say find your anchor first. Once you find your anchor, then you can go from there and borrow from other types. Because I think we're so quick to try other things because maybe whatever we're doing isn't working, or whatever it isn't feeling right. But if we don't know who we truly are, then when we try these different things, there's a danger that we might try to change ourselves. And I don't believe that people change. I believe we grow and we evolve. But when we evolve, as I always say, we're puppies. Puppies do not grow into cats. They grow into dogs. And so if you're a puppy, just know that. If you're a kitten, know that, and know that eventually you're going to grow into a cat or a dog. And once you have that anchor, then maybe you can borrow from the other types, right?
Absolutely. There's much to learn about all this from you, Eric, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, and also ways to buy this book. What is the best way for them to do so?
I always say, if you want to give Jeff Bezos your money, buy it on Amazon. It's there, but you can really buy it anywhere you buy books. So if you want to get it at Barnes and Noble, whatever your local bookstore is, even if it's not there, you can definitely order it from them. And yeah, anywhere online, you can get it. Just search Power of Personality.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.